Hello YouTube, this is Frugal and welcome to the first of a whole bunch of videos looking at the beta of the Pmdg 747 version 3, also known as the Pmdg 747-400 Queen of the Skies 2. Catchy name. Anyway, what I thought I would do is, as we work through the beta on this, because so many of you have been asking as well, when are you going to do more flying and more aircraft videos? This would be a prime opportunity. So as we work through the wide beta of the upcoming Queen of the Skies 2, I thought I'd start doing a series of videos on it. So today, we're going to start with a tour of the aircraft. We're going to look around the exterior, look around the interior, and then actually start it up. We're not actually going to go flying today. The next video I do will be flying. I'm going to do some pattern work, and then we'll start getting into fully loaded style videos. But for now, it's just going to be exploring everything there is. And one of the differences between this and Pmdg's other Boeings, notably the 737 and the 777. Now, the first question, I'm sure I've already seen it actually on forums, is what's the performance like? Well, bear in mind this is a beta. It is still in development. It's not finished. It's probably going to be a few months before you get it. I'm guessing. Don't hold me to that. I'm not speaking on behalf of Pmdg, but I know that on the 777 beta, we were in the beta phase for about 3-4 months, maybe a bit longer. And we've only been in the beta phase, the wide beta for the 747 for about 3 weeks, I think. So I think you got a few months to go, I would guess. So, given that, it's a little bit early to judge performance, but I haven't actually flown in FSX for a very long time. I've been doing most of my flying in P3D, and in the betas we tend to focus first on FSX and then on P3D or prepared. So I had to reinstall FSX and get it all configured. This is my install of FSX. So I'm obviously running Orbex FTX Global. This airport is Taxi to Gates kmco. I'm running Active Sky 2016 along with ASCA, so Active Sky Cloud Art. I've got Orbex Global Vector installed. Oh my gosh, tons of other stuff. Chaseplane is obviously handling the views for you right now, and I managed to tweak my sim a little bit when I installed it earlier today, and we are seeing I've locked the frame rate at 30 frames per second, and it is holding 30 frames per second at 4K. The performance is outstanding, and we're not even through the beta yet, so hopefully it remains outstanding. I can't see why it wouldn't. Anyway, let me grab my handy Xbox controller and I'll show you around the external model of this absolutely beautiful aircraft. And there she is. The 747 obviously is a huge aviation icon. It's the aircraft that's used as Air Force One currently. It's the aircraft that brought me to America. Very, very well-known aircraft, and quite different to the 737 and 777. The most obvious difference actually being those 4 engines. In fact, you can actually get it with 5 engines. People thought that was a joke when Pmdg posted a picture a little while ago, I think earlier this year, but there is a configuration with 5 engines. But anyway, normally 4 engines, as you can see here, each of them having about 57,000 pounds of thrust, which is unbelievable. As always with Pmdg aircraft, this is a study level simulation. So it's going to come with a few thousand pages of documentation, most of it licensed from Boeing. So it's the real deal. And it requires a lot of effort actually to get to grips with this aircraft. So when this finally comes out, I've got to repeat, this is a beta. You can't get it yet. When it finally comes out, what you're paying for is the opportunity to study and learn an in-depth simulation of a Boeing 747, unlike any other available today. It is really quite remarkable already. I love it to pieces. It's quite different to manage in the air as well because of those 4 engines, but one of the key things for me is it's a long-haul aircraft. The other Pmdg long-haul Boeing is obviously the 777, which I was a beta tester for as well. I like the 777 a great deal, but it's not actually my favorite Pmdg aircraft. My favorite is obviously the 737 NGX, and the reason for that is the 777 for me just had a little bit too much automation. And we were just chatting with Robert Randazzo about something related to this with the 777, that there's a misconception in simulation circles that the 777 is harder to hand fly than the 737. That's actually not the case. It's actually easier because of the fly-by-wire system. The fly-by-wire system keeps the aircraft where you would expect it to be, I guess, as you do things like change power. So as you increase power, which typically would make the nose of the aircraft rise, the fly-by-wire system kicks in and keeps it exactly where you planted it. Same for reducing power. So little things like that, although the 777 is amazing and beautiful and a stunning achievement, it didn't feel that much of a challenge, I guess, is probably the wrong way of putting it, but even so, the 747 is much more like the 737 for me. It doesn't have that high level of automation. It is, don't get me wrong, a very automated aircraft, state-of-the-art avionics and flight control systems and everything else, but not like the 777. So one of the things that they were saying they want to put in this later on in the beta, hopefully, is that tendency for the nose to rise as you load on the power, or for the nose to drop as you come off the power. It's small, it's not huge, but it does contribute to the aircraft being a bit more of a handful, something a pilot really needs to remain aware of. Anyway, let's get closer to this. As I said, I'm filming this at 4K, which is pretty stunning given the performance I'm getting, but given everything that I have installed, I've actually turned down my textures to about 2K resolution textures. But even at 2K here, you can see it looks, to Pmdg's usual standards, utterly jaw-dropping. And there's a nice touch actually on this Pmdg livery at the front. Sadly, earlier this year, Joseph F. Sutter, who is widely acknowledged as the father of the 747, he very sadly passed away, so Pmdg have dedicated this livery to him, and there's a really nice dedication on the front of the aircraft, which is a wonderful thing. Anyway, let's head underneath the aircraft and take a look at the modeling down there. And for me as well, not having flown FSX for a very long time, it's actually quite nice as well to be back in FSX and realize that it isn't as awful as many of us like to think it is. It's a very attractive sim if you get it configured right and tweaked properly. Look at this. Amazing detail here. Utterly jaw-dropping, as you would expect. Now, they have modeled the interior of the aircraft as well, but as usual with Pmdg aircraft, it's not really to the same level as, say, the flight deck or the exterior, because most people will be spending most of their time in the flight deck. Anyway, enough of this foolishness. Let me just put this back into chase plane view real quick, the cinematic view, for one last time, and then we will jump into the flight deck and I'll show you some of that. And then you'll get a proper tour of the flight deck as we actually start this up. And as we start the aircraft up, you're going to see what the key differences, I think, are between the 737 and the 747. Let's go in. Absolutely stunning level of detail in here. Beautiful modeling showing the wear and tear. This is obviously a well-used aircraft. Not a brand new one. Wear on the paint around the throttle quadrant down there. And as always, nothing breaks as you get closer and closer and closer. The level of detail here is just sublime. Also an older aircraft than the NGX, and of course the 737. So little touches like this. Look, let me go and adjust the speed here. The digits kind of vibrating a little bit as we go through the numbers. Touches like that are amazing. Love it, love it, love it. Now again, all Pmdg aircraft now ship and work with the Pmdg Operations Center. And with that, you can choose your livery, and the livery also drives the configuration of the aircraft. Many people, I'm surprised, still don't know that. But if you choose... Hang on, let's get rid of the cursor. My frame rates are good, except for that FSX bug, where if the cursor is visible, they're not so good. But anyway, many people don't realize that if you go into the Operations Center in any other Pmdg aircraft and choose, say, a British Airways livery or an American Airways livery, what that does is it changes more than the external paint scheme. It actually changes the configuration of the equipment in the cockpit as well. Same thing's going to apply to this. So choosing the different liveries will actually change the configuration of the equipment and how it all works, which is a wonderful touch. See down here, a few people have been asking this on forums. Does it have a weather radar? Yes, it has a weather radar. It has the one that you're familiar with from the NGX and the 777. It does, of course, work with the Hi-Fi Simulations Active Sky series of weather engines, and it works just the way you would expect it to work, which is great. A few little quirks as well, though. Down the bottom here, if you're used to the 777 and the 737, the auto brake switch is down there on the center console, not up on the front panel. And similarly, no smoking and seatbelt signs are down here on the center console as well. There are two jump seats behind the pilot and first officer. Let me turn around and show you them. There's one there with his own switches, communications, and there's another one over there, also has their own switches at the top there, which is very cool. Some other nice little touches in here as well. Working sunshades. The rear one comes down, the front one goes up. Let me show you. If I jump back into the pilot seat, spin the camera around here, rear one comes down, the front one. Works on both sides. Little touches like that are wonderful. There's even an ashtray here because this is an older aircraft, which is kind of cool. Not cool that there's an ashtray, but cool that we have that level of detail. Let's pop these up as well, you can see. Awesome. Let's look at the overhead, where you're going to be doing a lot of work, or we are in a moment when we start this thing up. So there's a lower overhead. There, obviously 4 engines, so a lot more buttons than you might be used to. Managing those in startup is initially quite daunting, but if you do, as the name implies, study the study level documentation, it's not so hard and you get the hang of it real quick. Then we have the rear or the aft overhead up here, past all the circuit breakers, which is the maintenance panels. Here. Very, very cool stuff. Amazing level of detail. So with all that said, let me put this controller down and we will start up this aircraft, and I'll walk you through what the startup's like. As I said, we're not flying in this video, we'll be flying in the next one and every one after it, but this one's really just an introduction, first impressions, giving you a view that you've perhaps not seen yet from all the static screenshots on Facebook. There's that FSX frame rate bug. Bye bye cursor. See you in a second. Okay, so let's work through the startup procedure. If you've flown a Boeing before, it's going to look very familiar because it's very, very similar, and they keep a common pattern, which is, if we look on the overhead, is to go down the overhead in strips, so the left one, the middle one, and the right one, and so on and so on. So first things first, the IRS mode selectors, we turn those from off to nav. So 2 right clicks, notice that switch pops out, nice touch as we do that. So that's all done. Next up, voice recorder switch. We're not really going to worry about that because it's a sim. Now we want to go and check the status displays and make sure that they're in good shape. They do look in good shape, but I will go all the way down and turn on the ICAS status display as well. Any second. Now on the main status display here, there's 2 things you want to check. The oxygen pressure. Oxygen pressure 1800 and 1860 is just fine, and then the hydraulic quantity, not the pressure because we don't have the pumps on yet, but 101, 97, 98, so we're all looking good there. And then we want to check the engine oil, so we click the engine button to bring up the engine display and check the oil quantity, 21, 22, 22, 22, so we're all good there. Put that back to status and get rid of it. Now on the real aircraft at this point, we'd check that we have the maintenance documents, check the circuit breakers, which unfortunately don't work in this, and then check the emergency equipment, but we can pretty much assume that all of that is good. The one thing we do need to keep an eye on though is the smoke evacuation handle. That is up here, and then if we move forward you'll see it just about here. Make sure that that is where it currently is and not pulled out or anything like that. So the smoke evac handle is exactly where it needs to be. Final thing to check, make sure the parking brake is set. Go down here and we'll pop on the parking brake, and that is it for the preliminary pre-flight procedure. Now we get into the CDU pre-flight procedure, which is very similar to actually the 777. Let me show you. So over here, the first thing we want to do is just verify that everything is correct here. So 747-400, our AIRAC data is a little bit out of date, but that's just fine. RB211 engines, we're all good. So we're going to position it after we clear this message. Go to positioning it now, and we are at KMCO. But we're at one of the cargo gates, so it's going to be next to impossible to put in a gate reference there. So if I click next page 2 times, we'll select one of the GPS references and go back and paste that in, and we're all set. Now we can set a route. Well, we're not going to fly today, but if we were, we could do some circuits here. So we'll put in KMCO. Once again, whoops, press the wrong button there. And we'll put KMCO in as the destination again. Let's choose, let's say, runway 18 left for our runway, and the flight number Pmdg 1. Now let's actually go ahead and set up the route to do a pattern. So we'll be departing from 18 left, we've already got that one, and we'll be arriving at, oh, we should have gone ILS 18 right, but that's fine, we'll take ILS 18 right for the landing. It doesn't matter for now, it's just setting stuff up. And if we go back to the legs page now, we can click on Hammy here, move Hammy up the top. In fact, no, let's choose Tuffy, that's a little bit closer. And the intercept, well, that's 185, so let's head 270 to intercept that. That in, execute, and if we look up the route now, we should have a route. We're all good. So that's pretty perfect. Having entered the route, the next step, just like in the 777 and the 737, is to move on and enter in performance initialization. We're not flying, but we'll assume 10 as the reserves. A cost index of 25. Circuit altitude, let's say 2,000 feet. Rate, thrust limits, we're going to derate to takeoff 2, climb 2, and then take off, let's say flaps 10. And we don't have V speeds because we haven't calculated everything else, but we're all good to go. So the CDU pre-flight is now complete. Now we get into the pre-flight procedure. Now, according to Boeing's documentation, it's the first officer's pre-flight first, and then the captain's are actually very similar. The first officer just has a couple of extra steps. So we'll actually do the first officer's, but as the captain. So first things first, the ELT switch should be guarded, which it is. Next, the EEC switches should all be guarded and show normal. So that's here, engine, electrical engine control. All the guards are closed, they all show normal. Now we set up the electrical panel underneath it. So the standby power selector here needs to be on automatic, which it currently is. The utility power switches now both need to go on, and we verify that the off lights go out. And you'll hear an increase in volume of the fans at that point. Battery switch should be on, it already is. Verify that the off light is out. Bus tie switches now all need to go to auto, and they already are, and we can verify that the isolation switches are all extinguished. The generator control switches now will go on, that would be these ones. We verify that the off lights are illuminated, so they're all currently on and the off lights are illuminated. We should also see at this point the drive disconnect lights are showing, which they currently are. The APU selector would be next, but we're not going to worry about the APU until a little bit later, so we can move on down to the hydraulics panel down here. The demand pump selectors, these 4 switches here, all need to be in the off position, which will show sysfault across the top of each and pressure warnings above the top of each, which they are. And then we get into the engine pump switches. They should all be on, and they currently are, and we can see pressure lights underneath them, so they're all good to go. Back up to the top now. Service interphone switch should be off. OBS, Observer's Audio System switch, should be in the normal position, which it is. And then fuel transfer main 1 and 4 switches should both be off. So fuel transfer down here, main 1, main 4, they are all off, and we verify that the valve lights are extinguished, which they are. On the fire panel, make sure that all of these are in, there are no lights showing, which is all good here. Make sure these also have no warning lights, and this guard, the APU, cargo fire discharge button is guarded, which it is. Now down to the engine start panel. Here are the start switches. A little bit different on a 737 or a 777. These ones pull out and press back in. They all need to be in, all 4 of them, which they currently are. The standby ignition selector needs to be in the normal position, which it is. And then the auto ignition selector. Which starter are we going to use? So we'll use number 2 today, I think. Over on the fuel jettison panel, make sure that fuel jettison is turned off, and we have no valve lights showing, which we currently don't. That's all good. On the fuel panel, all crossfeed switches need to be on, so that would be all of these. Now they currently are on, you can see the solid line across them, so they're all engaged. Now we make sure that all the fuel pump switches down here are currently turned off. We should see pressure warning lights illuminated on them all. If we had the APU running at this point, the main 2 aft pump pressure light would be out. That would be that one right there, but we don't have the APU running, so that's currently turned on. Down to the anti-ice panel, all the nacelle anti-ice switches should be off, wing anti-ice should also be turned off, window heat at this point can go on, and the windshield wipers go off. Now down to the lighting panel, outboard and inboard landing lights all off, runway turn-off lights off, taxi lights off, and that's the end of that center strip. Back up to the top, passenger oxygen, make sure the guard is closed, don't press that switch. Yaw damper switches should both be on, they are, both showing the on light. Down to the altitude panel down here. Landing altitude switch, well, we'll click that, make sure that that's selected. Outflow valve manual switches should be off, and the auto selector should be in the normal position, which it currently is. Now down to the ECS panel, passenger temperature and flight deck temperature both in auto. This light shouldn't be lit up right now, but it will go out shortly once we finish the rest of the pre-flight, so that's just fine. Trim air needs to go on, upper and lower recirc needs to go on, aft cargo heat switch needs to stay off. Equipment cooling selector should be on normal, high flow switch should be off, and the gasper should be on. I thought that was off, but it should be on. Down now to the bleed air panel. The pack sysfault light should not be showing, which is currently not. The pack control selectors all need to go to normal, as they have. Left and right isolation valves should both be on. They now currently are. The valve lights should be extinguished when we do that. There we go, off they go. Engine bleed air system fault lights should be out at this point, which they are. The APU bleed air switch needs to go on, and verify that the valve light there is also off, and then the engine bleed air switches themselves all need to go on. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally the last lighting panel. The beacon light switch is off, nav lights on, strobe lights off, wing lights off, logo lights off, and if we wanted at this point we could actually go ahead and do a light test just like any other aircraft. So that's bright, that's dim. If we go back to the captain's chair, we can do that on the main flight deck as well, like so. And look around, you should see a lot of warning lights, all very bright and shiny. Not out on any bulbs right now, which is great. So now we can get on with the MCP. So I'm going to change my view here. I'm going to turn the flight director switches on, 1 and 2. My one went on first, so I'm the master. And we're going to choose the status display on the ICAS messages, which was already showing. Now over here, we're going to use barometric pressure for the minimums. We're using inches for the barometric pressure itself. We'll turn on the flight path vector. Weather radar is off. TCAS will be off at this point. We should be in map mode, and I can change the range down or up as much as I want. So we'll have it about there, I think, and we'll turn the VOR on. Now we're going to test my oxygen, which is down here. And the way we do that is we press and hold. First we do this one, 100% test, and then that. So that's all good, all working just fine. Now we go back on over to the ICAS display and make sure that we still see the same stuff that we saw before. There we go, pressures are just fine. We're not having any problems with oxygen. Now the source select panel, which is this here. On the captain side, most of the key switches will be pointing left. On the first officer side, they'll be pointing right. So flight director, FMC, IRS and air data all left. And on the first officer side, if I whiz across over there, I don't have a view set up for it, bear with me, they will all be right. So flight director, FMC is on FMC right, IRS right, and air data right. Finally, check my CRT sources. Inboard CRT and lower CRT should both be on normal, which they are. We check on his ones as well, they're both normal, that's all good. Now we can verify the displays. So what we should see is the auto throttle mode right here will be blank, which it currently is. Roll mode is toga, or takeoff go around. Pitch mode is takeoff go around, and AFDS is flight director. So that's all perfect, we're all good. Now we check the ground proximity panel, which is over on the first officer's side. My frame rates have just dropped, by the way, because of that FSX bug where the mouse cursor is showing. Every time that shows, you'll lose a lot of frames. It's always been that way. Unfortunately, it's still that way, and Pmdg are never going to fix that. That's not their problem. But anyway, ground proximity panel, make sure that all three of these are closed. Might as well check that these are closed as well, which they currently are. Alternate flaps and gear. So the landing gear lever should be down. Alternate flaps selector should be off. The alternate flaps arm switch, there we go, is not armed. And we're all good. The alternate gear extend nose and body is covered. And the final thing to do on all these checks is just to cross-check, whoops, completely the wrong view, is to go and cross-check on ICAS the engine readouts. So we'll bring up engine here, and if I drop the camera down here, you can see everything looks exactly as it should. Don't have any warnings that are not expected at this point. We haven't suddenly lost any oil, everything's looking great. Now we can go down to the radio panel. We'll set up the weather radar ready to go, so I'm going to turn gain up so we actually get an image if it's light clouds. Make sure the auto button is down. WX plus T is what I like. We'll tune into active sky, just pick up the weather, which I already picked up a little bit earlier, but just to show you.
Kilo Mike Charlie Oscar airport information Echo 2153 Zulu weather wind 297 at 6 visibility 10 sky condition temperature 24 dew point 11 altimeter 3006 advice on initial contact you have information Echo.
That's all good.
Kilo Mike Charlie.
No smoking signs go on, seatbelt signs can go on. We could set up the transponder at this point as well. For the sake of argument, go ahead and do it. And we're actually good now to do the pre-flight checklist. So let me just find where that is in my notes here. The pre-flight checklist, oxygen, tested 100%. Flight instruments, Let's go look at those. Heading 277, altimeter 3006. Parking brake is set. Fuel control switches cut off. Pre-flight checklist complete. Alright, so with all that done, at long last, we are at the before start procedure. So we'll go ahead and do that. Flight deck door closed and locked. CDU display. On my side, it needs to be takeoff reference. So we'll bring that up and we'll go init ref. Thrust limit, takeoff reference, get rid of that. On his side, it should be the legs page, which it now is. MCP, we want to set in V2. We don't know our V speeds, but if we were going to fly right now, and we've been lazy enough not to work it out, we can guess probably about 180 is just fine. Don't need to arm LNAV or VNAV. Our initial course, though, is going to be 180. I love the animation on those digits. Whoops, keep going. There we go. And finally, we'll set an altitude here of 2,000. Taxi and takeoff briefings, not going to worry about those today, but we'll say that they're done. Exterior doors, we need to check that the doors are closed. We can do that on the ICAS displays. So once again over here, and we'll click on DRS, which is doors, not drag reduction system. It's not Formula 1. And they are all armed and closed. So we're good. So at this point, we can go ahead now and set up the hydraulics panel. So back on up to the overhead. Pressurize number 4 system first to prevent a fluid transfer between the different systems. So here's a number 4 system over here, and what we do is we switch that down to aux with a left click, and you should see the sysfault and pressure lights go out. Takes a moment. Oh no, I'm sorry, the pressure light stays on. Sysfault goes out. Now we can do hydraulic demand pumps 1, 2 and 3. You turn all 3 of those onto auto. 1, 2 and 3. And again, sysfault lights will start to go out. Pressure lights for now will stay on. Now I had this before, and I'm obviously doing something wrong. I'm fairly new at this, but my sysfault light did stay on number 1, and it's doing that again right now. I'm not going to worry about it because I know that it will go off in a second as we continue through. So I'm just going to ignore that, even though I think I've done something wrong. Anyway, fuel panel. All main fuel tank pump switches now need to go on. So mains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all the pressure warning lights should go out. The beacon now goes on to both, and we can check recall. The recall is a little bit different on this aircraft. It's a little button hidden all the way over here. Click it. There's our recall. Nothing unexpected there. So we'll cancel. Now we can set our trim. Down here, again, not going to fly, so I'm not going to worry about the trim right now, but you'll see that in the next video. So the final thing to do is the before start checklist. So before start checklist, flight deck door closed and locked. Passenger signs on. MCP V2 is 180, heading is 180, altitude 2,000 feet. Takeoff speeds, we actually don't know. CDU pre-flight's completed. Trim, we haven't set it, but we should. Taxi and takeoff briefing kind of completed. Beacon is set to both. Before start checklist complete. So now we can actually get into starting this beast up, which I'm going to do right here. So first, we're going to bring up the secondary engine displays down the bottom here. The pack control selectors now need to be set. Typically you'd start with 2 or 3 packs off. If we're doing 2 engines at the same time, we would actually have 3 packs turned off. We're going to turn 2 of them off. That would be this one and this one back down here. Now the start sequence, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Simple as that. And you don't, according to the engine start procedure that I'm looking at from Boeing, you don't actually worry about N2 or N1. You just flick the fuel control switch as soon as the engine is starting. So we'll pull engine number 1 and then fuel on 1. Let's take a look. Start to see some numbers moving now. Oh, no. I'm very foolish, and I'm going to leave this in the video because I think it's useful to you guys. I can't do this because I'm still connected to ground power. So before we do any of that, I'm going to go ahead and start the APU. So we'll get the APU on start, like so. And we'll go back down here to look at the ICAS. Whoops, I've lost control of all my views completely now. We'll go over to electrical, stat. I'm going to watch the APU come online. Can't do any of that nonsense we're starting because you haven't got any power. All we're on is current ground power and the chocks are in, and it will prevent us from starting the engines as a result. Silly frugal. Alright, so it looks like the APU is good to go. If we pop up to the top, we should see APU available. So on. That cured the hydraulic problem. So the hydraulic problem was actually telling me that I needed to go and get some bleed air running and get the APU running and all that kind of stuff. So I've done all that now, which means I can go down to the CDU, bring up the menu page, FS actions, ground connections, remove the wheel chocks, which will also remove the power, and then return to my takeoff reference page. Now we can go ahead and start engines. I am so sorry, my apologies. So, I'm going to start engine number 1 first of all. Pull that and flick that. We will turn this back on over here. The engine display, you can see it's starting to power up. You can hear it as well. If I pop outside, you'll be able to see it. And hear it. Alright, back into the cockpit. We are still starting, so we're not at starter cutout yet because the light is still on. It takes a little while for the engines to spool up. You can, if you so desire, just jump in and start doing the other engines. I'd like to give it a moment. I think we're getting close now, so I'm going to start engine number 2 and fuel. Hear it kicking in now. Beautiful sound. Alright, let's do engine number 3. Start a cutout on 1. And we'll jump on number 4 now as well. There it goes. Pop outside and take a look. Exhaust here. Pretty cool effect. You can almost feel how incredibly powerful this thing is just sitting here listening to the engine start. Cut out on 2, just waiting on 3 and 4. That will put us into the before taxi procedure. Just to show you what's involved. Cut out on 3. Waiting on 4 now. See the generator starting to come online as well now. Hydraulic pressure building in 4. System 4 just went out. Generators coming up. Starter cut out on 4. Alright, so let's disconnect the APU. Pump number 4 onto auto. Normal on the packs. Wait for this yellow light to turn off. And this one. And there it goes. So all that remains now would be to set the flaps, do the flight controls check, and taxi. So that's it for this first impressions, just a glimpse at how complicated and in-depth the brand new Pmdg 747 version 3 or Queen of the Skies 2 really is. I do hope you enjoyed it. Excuse my mistakes, I'm new at this as well. Oh no, we're not done. We're not done because look, we have warnings here. Fuel override center left and right pumps. I didn't deal with those. We'll go ahead and do those. Should have checked that. There we go. They're all off now. So now I can check recall. Like I said, excuse the mistakes. Those on as well. Now we're good. There we go. Everything's clear. So excuse the mistakes, but as I said, I hope you enjoyed this first impressions introduction to the brand new Pmdg. Still in beta. There are still things to address, such as my knowledge, as well as new features that they're building in and issues like that. But it is coming along really well. There will be a lot more videos, probably 1 or 2 a week from this point forward. So stay tuned. As always, my name is Frugal. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you all very soon.